Hey, it's Bill from the Bill Simmons podcast. FIFA World Cup 26 fans, listen up. Is the official beer sponsor of the FIFA World Cup 26. Michelob Ultra is giving away $1 million worth of FIFA World Cup 26 tickets and prizes. Enter now at michelobultra.com/superior access/FIFA World Cup 26. Michelob Ultra FIFA World Cup 26 superior access. No purchase necessary. Open U.S. residents 21 plus begins on December 1st, 2025. Ends on July 31st, 2026. Multiple entry periods. Visit www.michelobultra.com/superior access/FIFA World Cup 26 for free entry deadlines, prizes, and details.
Mornings have a rhythm. You can hear it, feel it. And at Quaker, we fuel it. With 100% whole grain oats and a good source of fiber in every bowl, helping you turn that rhythm into your soundtrack for a great day. Fuel to start whatever's next. Quaker, official sponsor of FIFA World Cup 26.
Let's go! Let's go!
Welcome to No Free Yards on the Coach and Coordinator Network. This is a podcast series built around the details that decide games. Dan Carrel sits down with coaches across the profession to talk defense, leadership, player development, staff building, and the situations that separate winning football from hoping it works. In this episode, Coach Carrel is joined by Adam Harvey, head coach at Long Creek High School in New Braunfels, Texas, for a conversation on building program, adapting as a coach, teaching toughness, and preparing players for moments that matter. Here's our first episode of No Free Yards with Dan Carrel.
Choice Hotels get you more of what you value. Here's a little tune to help you remember. Same drive, different day. Don't you wish you were getting away? Pack your bags and come on through. Texas, Ohio, Alaska, we're up there too. Comfort Inn, it's calling your name. Save on the stay. Oh, and free waffles are yours to claim. Well, I hope you like my little song. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Dan Carrel here with the No Free Yards podcast on the Coach and Coordinator Network. Get to spend some time today with a guy I've known for a long time, 23 years in coaching at the middle school and high school level, unbelievable coach and friend there in Central Texas. Spent time at Cibolo Steele High School, Hutto High School, Clemens High School, and is now the head football coach at Long Creek High School in New Braunfels, Texas. Adam Harvey, welcome to the show, man. Happy to have you here.
Appreciate you, Dan. It's an honor to be able to talk to you anytime, but to be on this podcast, you know, with what Keith has done with Coach and Coordinator, and now that you're involved, man, I'm all about it. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, man. I often said I get a handful of friends in this profession. If I could have just filmed the phone calls we've had over the years, talking football, talking life, talking leadership, talking coaching and teaching players, that I probably could have 100 podcast episodes out there right now. And certainly you'd be one of those guys, man. So I'm good to finally get you on here where we can get something recorded and get a chance to share a little bit.
You bet. Appreciate it, man.
So let's dive in. I know that obviously being, where you are now as a head coach at a school that really you started, you're the first head coach at the school, correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
And so you go from that, you've been at some places that have had a lot of players. You've been at it through the years. 23 years in this thing, and the variety of schools you've been with the differences of players. Like, what do you feel like has changed over time?
Yeah, there has been a lot that's changed, but I would go to the old adage of ball being cyclical, right? It is. And what goes around comes around. I think, the kids these days and the way they want to learn has changed somewhat. The 30 seconds of fame piece with the social media and all the things is certainly a challenge. But at the end of the day, man, it's just a matter of us getting to the point where we know that those kids are listening to us because of the relationships that we have and build with those guys. And so, man, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I think things have changed. But in the same breath, I think kids are still kids, and, the tricks are all the same. It's just a matter of us getting on their level, bringing them along with us, not allowing them to get comfortable and stagnant and all the things. And then also just embrace everything, right? Embrace the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the cliche of embrace the suck, I think, comes into play. But get after it, man, no matter what, because the process is so much bigger than the result. The result is going to be posted on social media, but the process to get there is grueling. And so I think just a matter of teaching that physical toughness, but also the mental and the psychological piece is very important.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point, and a handful of them. But one thing that I speak with the players about often, and especially we just had exit meetings after spring practice, and everybody has dreams and everybody has goals and they want to progress as players, and they have favorite players, and they see social media and they see the guy coming from college at the draft with his chain on and putting his hat on. He's got his nice suit, but man, so much went into before that. And so many of those guys had such a dedication and commitment to getting better. And I mean, have you had those conversations with players? How do you balance that? How do you get them to understand that the game's not, really the guys that have so much success, it's not what the game can do for them. It's what they could do for their team and what they could do to better themselves. And those things are a result of that. Is that something that you've had to address with guys?
Absolutely, man. I mean, I think that's probably an everyday occurrence, right? Like it's a nonstop conversation, whether it's one kid or the next. And I don't know. I think back to a situation that I was involved with, not necessarily directly, but indirectly at Cibolo Steel. You mentioned I was there. I was there for 7 years, and we had some really, really good players there. One kid in particular, grown man now, that I think about in regards to this type of story, as you bring it up, is Terrence Steele, the right tackle for the Dallas Cowboys. And Terrence was a B-teamer as a freshman. Big kid, had a solid frame. We all had known that he was going to be a stud. But the way that dude worked every single day and put his head down and continued to get after it, man, he put himself in position to be a really good high school offensive lineman. Even then, he wasn't heavily recruited. We kind of had a pipeline going to Texas Tech at the time. And, we knew he was, again, a good frame, big body. Coach Mike Jinks, who was at Cibolo Steel for a long time and made the jump to Texas Tech when Kingsbury was hired, kind of had just his eye on a lot of kids there at Cibolo Steel. So Terrence had one offer, kind of the Wes Welker type story, one offer coming out of high school. He goes to Texas Tech and makes the most of it within, I think, the first 3 games of his freshman year. He's starting. So he didn't get a red shirt that year because he had to jump in because of injuries, but he made the most of it. And then, 4 years later, he goes undrafted. Well, gets picked up as an undrafted free agent by the Cowboys. And now, I don't know if he is today, but I know 2 years ago, I believe he signed a contract where he was the highest paid offensive lineman for the Dallas Cowboys. Just a really, really impressive deal. But I watched that kid work every single day. I was the head track coach, and he threw for us. And when he was in the ring, it was no different than when he was in the weight room, when he was on the field. The dude just worked and put his head down and didn't listen to any of the noise and really got after it. And it's obviously paid off both physically and figuratively, man. The dude is, he's impressive to say the least. And so, yeah, man, I think just reminding kids of that, like the older you get, the harder it is. I think that's a misnomer. A lot of times kids think, oh, I've done that, been here, done that. I'm a little bit older. I know this or I know that. And it's not the case. So you got to continue to put your head down and go to work, continue to see what's in front of you and go and get it. But that's the process, right? Falling in love with that everyday piece is probably the most difficult thing for these kids because of the chains around the neck and the hat on, like you were saying, and then the 30-second social media post that everybody is liking or retweeting or whatever the case is. And it's so much bigger than that. So I think we could probably have a job in and of ourselves with that alone, right? Get off the board and just go talk to kids about persistence and being that dog, having some grit about you.
Yeah, those stories are not the ones that can be told in a 20-second clip. And I think that we as a society, we put the story of, man, this guy was a freak in high school. He was 15 years old and went out and ran a 10.7 800 meter. And, he jumped a 10-foot broad jump. And that's the stuff you see on social media. You see the natural abilities celebrated so much. And because the story of a Terrence Steele and the grind and the effort that it took over time to become great isn't something you can tell in a minute or 37 seconds on a social media post. So we don't promote it enough. And the players don't see that. Young people get impacted by what they see. They don't see those things enough. And I mean, they tell them all the time, but they tell them in documentaries. You could say it about 100 athletes, and obviously Michael Jordan being an example of somebody who didn't have as much success as a young high school person and goes on to be one of the greatest. But what do you see when you see a Michael Jordan highlight? You see, the shot against Utah. You see these highlights, you see these dunks, you see these plays. You don't see the grind it took to get there. And I think that's such an important part that we have to teach the young players. And you don't teach it, like you have to reinforce it every day. You teach it once, but you reinforce it by the minute. And I think that's the important part of that. So
absolutely.
So obviously running a program now, all these experiences, where do you think you've grown the most over the years, just with the variety of roles you've had as the players have changed? Like, what is caused you to like, man, I really need to grow in this area. This is something I need to develop in, to manage this thing the way I want to be the coach I want to be. I've got to really put effort into this and grow.
Yeah, man, I think that's a great question. And, I never arrive, never want to arrive. I think that's part of that process we just talked about. But I think with me, probably the biggest area of growth that I've seen myself and I still want to grow in is just being that coach that doesn't matter who I'm coaching. I'm getting those kids in position to make plays. I'm putting those kids in position to be good men. And I'm putting those kids in the position, to go after what they want, right? When you're at a place like Cibolo Steel and you've got athletes, all around you, I think it's easy to look like, feel like, and be a great coach, so to speak. When you go to another place that, you're teaching 190 at a boundary corner position, and then you find yourself 5'7", 157 at the next spot, you better be creative, right? In the same breath, like have your convictions, have the knowledge that you have based on what you have coached all the years and continue to make it work, right? And that's where I've really, I guess, self-reflected probably more than anywhere in the scheme world is like, okay, here's what I believe. I'm a press corner guy, right? I love press coverage. But how can I teach 157 to do the same things in a roundabout way? Not the exact same things, but in a roundabout way as a 190, who is now on the Indianapolis Colts, right? True story there. That happened, but in the same breath, like how can I build the relationships that I need to build with kids? And I would say probably, Dan, more than anything, that's it, man. Like just understand the cliche is what it is. What are we in this for? I love the Billy Graham quote that, one coach will impact more in a year than many or all people will in a lifetime. And that's so true. But like, how can I build relationships with the different personalities, the different types of kids that we have? We've got one name that we play for in the Long Creek Dragons, but there's several different last names. And how can we bring that together in the midst of, the buzz phrase of culture or what have you, and make the most of the situation with kiddos that are in our, under our care? I would say that that's where I've grown the most, but also still have a lot to go, in the world of being a great coach or being an elite coach, because I don't want to just be great. I'm after being elite. I want to be one of the top coaches that have ever walked the face of the earth. Well, if I want to do that, I got to grow. And that's where sometimes that's scary to think. It's scary to say those words, especially when you know that some people might be listening and they're going to hold you to it. But in the same breath, like, let's go. I want to continue to get better so that I am that guy when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there that are important. If our expectation of the players is that they can become the best player they can be and the most elite they can be, then it's hard to implement that. It's hard to train them to do that if we're not trying to do the same thing with our own career and our own lifestyle. But the thing that you mentioned there that I would love you to expound on a little bit, because I think it's one of the most valuable things you can have as a coach, and probably in any profession, I would think. I only know one profession, but it's self-reflection and being critical of the things that you do. So take me through a little bit of your self-reflection and the things that you've thought about over the years and that process for you.
Yeah, I would start with humility. I think there's a really fine line with humility, confidence, conceitedness, cockiness. I really do. And I think it's important to actually flirt with that line without going over it. If you're not walking around confident with, your shoulders back, your neck bowed, and knowing that you bring a lot to the table, I think you're missing out. One of the things that I've really self-reflected on, and I teach a lot with our kids and our coaches, is to be selfless rather than unselfish, right? I think there's a difference there. I believe that unselfishness can become passive. You can go sit in the corner and watch everybody else work and be quote unquote unselfish. The selfless people are the ones that say, man, I know what I have and I know what I can bring to the table. I know my worth, and I'm going to bring as much as I possibly can, but I'm going to make less of me so that others can shine as well, right? I'm going to make less of me so that I can put people in position to be whatever they want to be and be successful. And that's what leadership is. It's having hard conversations when the hard conversations need to be had. And that's easy to do, I think, from coach to player. Sometimes that's harder to do from coach to coach. And, that's something that I always want to be, man. I want to be that guy that, is not afraid of the hard conversations, but the hard conversations are not about me being the better person or being conceited or being quote unquote ahead of that guy. I tell my staff all the time, man, I'm not a boss, I'm a leader, and leaders are going to have hard conversations. But as long as we're going in the right direction and you're better because of it, then I think I'm being selfless. It may not always feel good. It may not always, feel like I'm helping you out. But at the end of the day, let's get to where you want to get. and I'll want to help you any way I can. So, man, I think that self-reflection piece is huge, but I would probably summarize it in I want to be selfless rather than unselfish so that others will shine just as much, if not more than I.
Yeah, I think you think about those hard conversations that you have to have, and when you're starting out, maybe even as a player, and then you get into coaching, some of those conversations they can feel at least subtly maybe like an attack or at you, and somebody's coming at you, but you start to realize when you get in leadership roles that appreciate the person that'll have that conversation with you, because it's not particularly easy for them. And it's not always easy for a coach to sit down another coach and say, hey, this is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
This needs to be fixed. We need to change this. And that's something as a young coach, it's, in my opinion, is really important to learn and understand, is that if the coach is taking time to do that, if he is spending the mental energy, if he's strong enough to do that, he's doing it for you. He's not doing it to you. And I think that's a big part of that, man. And I know as we both grow in leadership roles, that's certainly something to keep in mind.
Absolutely, man.
Adapting, obviously, over time with players, understanding that. I think a little bit to the game, as you say, is cyclical. It's constantly changing. Schematically, I came up in this world when the quarterback was just really starting to run the ball heavily. And I think, in the early teens, and we're trying to defend Q run at all times. And then I saw that in college football in 13 years, I saw that kind of evolve a little bit to where we want to run the quarterback as little as possible. There's always the threat of it, but we're not going to sit there and design as many runs for our top guy, our number one guy, and especially in college now with the portal situation, you might only have one on your team you feel comfortable with, where, in the past, maybe you're developing young guys that you feel really good about, but you got one guy a lot of times and you're not going to risk him. So that's one thing, but just speak a little bit from a defensive perspective. Where have you adjusted schematically and what's changed over the years for you in that?
Yeah, I think down in Texas, man, with the spread and the evolution from early 2000s with the air raid, when Mike Leach came down here for the first time in the state of Texas, like that was a whole new world for a lot of defensive coaches. And, I think that piece probably shaped me as a defensive guy more than anything. I actually was at Texas Tech when Leach was hired. And, prior to him being there with Spike Dykes, that was the era that I grew up. I would say that, probably disguising the most would be what I would say I would hang my hat on the most. I remember a conversation with Mike Gundy about disguising. And, one of the things I asked him, being an offensive guy, I just said, Coach, what would you say is the most difficult piece for a quarterback at your level, Power 5 at the time, Power 4 level, that I might be able to implement, simple enough that I might be able to implement with my high school guys? And we had that pipeline to Texas Tech that I mentioned earlier. There was also one to Oklahoma State. Thibodeau still won the state championship prior to me getting there in 2010. Man, Gundy was coming in, snagging all those guys. I remember Hammerschmidt and Tim Duffy, they were at our practices every other week. It was kind of cool. So when Gundy came in, I just flat out asked him, and dude, he gave me a really profound answer. He said, there's a lot of nuances about the game, and the game, can be very complex at times. He said, but you got to keep it simple. And so I know this, there is not a quarterback that I've ever coached or watched on film that will look through the legs of a center to do anything other than catch a snap. Now, if he's disguising, he might look close, but he's got his eyes up seeing what the defense is doing before he's ready to catch a snap. So if you can figure out, what that body language looks like or what it is, and when he looks through the legs of the center, now make your move, right? Now make your disguise. And so we wanted to show a too high shell a lot. If we're scrolling down into a Sky 3 concept, we're going to do that as late as possible. And so, man, that's one of the things that, I've really tried to emulate as much as I possibly can as a defensive back coach. And then through that, birth a drill that we did every single day. It was part of our EDDs. So we would do our footwork. Obviously, everything starts from the ground up. But the very next thing after our footwork drills was a communication drill. And I actually put all, 4 guys out there without a nickel. And then sometimes we would bring our outside backers, our nickels into play with our sub-package stuff. But they had to call based on, I would just yell out a formation, and they had to call what coverage that we were in. If we called a motion, they had to make a motion adjustment and really visualize the whole game without any offense on the field. So, man, I would say that, schematically, run what you run, but I think disguising those schemes is probably more important sometimes than actually what you're, you got to execute it for obvious reasons. And I'll talk about that in the No Free Yards Clinic. But like, if you're not executing it, It's probably because you're not communicating it, right? And you got to communicate it first.
Man, I tell you, it was a rough off season for us in the disguise world because you hear a lot of these quarterbacks now, man. A lot of offensive coaches talking about the true progression reads and not trying to read the defense. I was like, man, they're starting to catch on. They're starting to get on to us. They're not putting as much stock into what we're showing them pre-snap anymore, and that was a big part of what I've done in the past, and still what I'm gonna do. But you hear Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins at the Falcons talking about it. You hear some of these coaches talking about just progression reads because there's too much. I mean, if you watch the Minnesota Vikings and Brian Flores, I think he just made it so impossible to read what the heck they're actually doing because I'm a coach and I can't tell half the time what they're trying to do, but they do it very successfully and very well. And I think that they are trying to, some of these quarterbacks, and maybe that's a little bit, I know there's a narrative out there that the passing game has gotten, I mean, I hate to say dumbed down, but maybe simpler in some ways. And maybe that's a product of it, is that we've pushed them a little bit by not showing them exactly what we're doing and what we're in. So I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, the chess game, that happens, I think, pre-snap is probably more than the game that happens post-snap. It's kind of crazy because it happens so fast, right? I don't know. It used to be 6 to 8 seconds. I don't know what the new statistics say as far as the average football play goes, but that 6 to 8 seconds really is determined in the 40 or how much every time it takes between plays, in my opinion. Because, you feel like things are slowing down some too, right? Like there for a while, it was, just as fast as you possibly could go. Again, down here in Texas with our browse and spreading it tick to tick and running all verts and, and then choice routes off of that. And so you better be ready and you better be thinking ahead. But, now it's kind of slowed down a little bit with the tight ends coming back into play. And, even the Q run, like you mentioned earlier, I think is still kind of hovering around with the tight ends. And, I see a lot of Q counter, Q power.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I would just say that for us, right, just be as thorough as we can in the communication piece so that we're at least making them think about what we're doing. And as long as they're doing that, then they're maybe taking their mind and taking some of that brain capacity off of one thing and onto another.
Well, that was the most eye-opening thing when I was in pro ball for a year, is that pro offenses use the play clock, right? They will utilize the play clock. They will take their time. They will get in a huddle. They'll come out. They'll give you opportunities. I was even tagging looks. I had every call was pre-tagged with a word, and we had a whole category of them. And you could, hey, we're going to show rotation one way. We're pressuring. We're going to show rotation the other way and flip it on the snap. We're going to show a shell and squirm to the post. There was a variety of things. We could show zero or show a buzz rotation, which was effective when we were kind of playing mini because it wasn't getting us too far out of our spots. But if we were playing strong buzz in that week game plan, we would show that rotation when we were in any type of mini concept. So yeah, when people use the play clock, I think you have a lot of options there as a coach. Now, you get into college football often, and it's really hard to say you're going to do that because even though some of them that will, I do think 12's coming back a lot. And especially in college football, you see a lot of 2 tight end sets. You're seeing a lot more of that. People protecting their edges, not trying to give up the easy pressures off the edge that can get the ball, knock the ball down in the backfield. But it is interesting as they start to use the clock more, how that can be utilized, because you can't utilize it every snap, because they will still have their plays where it's go, go, go. But it is something I think everybody should think about. I think tempo is not as often with most teams as it used to be, where some people used to play them and it was go, 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 go. And if they slowed it down, you were shocked. But
agreed.
I will say in college, and I would expect in high school even the teams that go fast still will often use the play clock on third down. That's where we get some opportunity to disguise a little bit. So
yeah, no, good point.
That's a whole conversation in of itself, because there's a lot to that, and that's from a coaching standpoint, those are the things I think you can make a big difference on with some subtle changes.
This episode is part of our lead up to No Free Yards, Win the Situation, a coaching coordinator network smart clinic built for defensive coaches. The clinic focuses on the situations that decide games: third down, red zone, sudden change, backed up, 2-minute, 4-minute, and weekly game planning and preparation that goes along with it. Coach Harvey will be part of the clinic with sessions on red zone defense, including high red zone and low red zone, his philosophy, aggression, field spacing, and game film from Long Creek. The link to this smart clinic is in the show notes. 18 presentations, including 3 live sessions and access for 100 days, only $49. Be sure to click the link in the show notes.
So here we are, took over as a head coach, okay, adapting all these new responsibilities, all right, learning to manage the game, having to deal with offensive players and coaches. Used to be probably most of your communication was just being upset with them and yelling at them in the coach's locker room. But now we're managing them. Now we're in charge of them. Got quarterback situation, which is always something that has to be handled with care. A lot of us as defensive coaches, somebody told me one time, offensive coaches try to fix problems with a light bulb. We try to fix them with a hammer. Obviously, dealing with a quarterback situation is something that needs to be fixed with a light bulb and with some level of tact. So how have you handled all that stuff? How have you handled all these new responsibilities and taking over an entire team and managing that?
Yeah, man, I think, knowing your strengths is one thing. Knowing the challenges that you might have, I'm not going to call it weakness, right? Because I'm a hammer. No, I have weaknesses for sure. I think knowing both of those situations is the most important, right? So one of the things I try to do is for lack of better ways to put it, play devil's advocate a little bit. Hey, here's how I would defend this situation. Just get those guys thinking rather than coming in and micromanaging and telling them exactly what I think should be run. Just saying, hey, this is the way I would defend it, and get their wheels spinning a little bit. So I think hiring. You hear it all the time, right? It's a cliche, but hiring guys that are smarter than you, I think, would be step number one. We've been able to bring in some phenomenal coaches here. This past offseason, I brought 3 in, and all 3 of them are studs, man. The one with the less tenure is 16 years in, and so been around the block a time or two. The other guy, he's been a head coach, been an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, a lot of small school experience. He's actually going to do special teams for us. He kind of was put on the map at a place out in the Houston area, Tomball High School. With his special teams expertise. Cristobal is a stud. And then finally, we got a guy in most recently from the Power 4 level. He was at Boston College, and he's going to actually work the back end on the defensive side. That's my baby, obviously, and I want to make sure that I can turn that loose to somebody that I trust and that knows what they're doing. And so that's been able to free me up, this spring anyway. I haven't had a season with it yet, but this spring I was able to be freed up and go and spend a little bit more time on that offensive side of the ball. But yeah, I would say the light bulb and the hammer thing is real, man. And I really want my coaches to coach. I just want to be there to show support. There might be times where I am a good cop. There are times where I'm a bad cop. If I feel like one particular unit is not quite performing like they need to, and I go over and I'm listening to the coaching points, and maybe there's a reason they're not performing like they need to. Well, I'm going to step in because that's what I need to do as the head coach. Again, not to step on any toes or to micromanage or to overtake what that coach is doing. But if it's not working, then I want to make sure that, my voice is heard in that particular area. And, pressure is real. Pressure also creates diamonds, and it's not about me calling anybody out. It's just about us being the best we can be, kind of going back to what I said earlier. Hard conversations are going to be had. And, one of the things that I just don't pay a whole lot of attention to, because I really try to build the right relationship away from the field, is calling people out on the field, man. It's going to be a chaotic environment. I believe if you don't call each other out in practice and it happens on the game night, man, you're really, really asking for trouble, because that's where things can blow up in a hurry. And so we'll practice those things. We'll practice a little bit of adverse situations. One of the things that we've done is create if I feel like practice is a little lull and kind of mundane and we're going through just the motions, we'll do what we call sudden change. And so I've been fortunate enough to have a DFO, and he'll, blow the horn. And as soon as the horn blows, everybody knows you go to your sideline. We practice sideline etiquette. They got to be behind the line. They got to be cheering on third down. They better be giving our third down signal, money, 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 all the things that we try to do in the game situation. And that kind of breaks up the monotony of practice a little bit. And it also keeps coaches on their toes, because they don't know when it's coming either. That's all up to me, right? So those are some things that, I've seen. I've still, like we all do, we still things through programs that we go and watch, but also just making sure that the good cop, bad cop piece is in play. And I'm not harboring anything within, but I'm also not stepping on toes either. And I don't know, man, I think I'm doing an okay job with it, but there's another area where I can grow, as we were talking about earlier. And we'll know a little bit more after. Everything was inexpensive the last 2 years, man, with us being a brand new school. Here we go. Year 3, it's the real deal. We finally have seniors. We're full comprehensive. We've got a really tough schedule, and here we go. And so I'll be able to grade myself a little bit better here in the next few months after I see what we got in the fall.
Yeah. I love the sideline etiquette, practicing that type of thing. That I think it's really important, sudden change situations, third down situation, but coming off the sideline and being able to get your one base, one nickel, whatever your packages are, get them in a huddle, talk to them, get them to focus on the coach, understand that the coach has valuable information that he's going to give you before you take the field, and be focused in that situation. It seems like something that should just be a given and just be really just easy to manage. But to me, if you don't work on that in practice, those sideline huddles in the game are chaos. And they don't need to be chaos. They need to be focus, right? And you got trainers coming up, squirting water in their mouth and giving them towels, and guys messing with their chin strap. And you got every distraction. Somebody glances up, their mom's in row 3, and you have every distraction in the world right there. And it's the time to be the most focused. So I believe heavily in creating that. I do that. And every time the defense, 1s, 2s, 3s, whoever it is, takes the field, I tell them something. And sometimes it's not even something highly important, but I make sure that their eyes are on me, they're focused, and hey, and if I got nothing to say, I'll be, hey, watch reverse right here, right? And I have no clue if a reverse is coming. I got no idea, right? Nothing. But just the value of that, hey, this is a time and place where we exchange information. You get something that might help you when you get out there. Now let's take the field like we own the thing and go out there and play with some confidence, right? And those are the little things that to me will make a difference at least a handful of times a year. Right, you'll give them something in a sudden change situation at the -43 that this is a shot play coming, and the corner will back up 3 steps more than he normally would, and he defends it. And that just, the truth is that changed the season because they catch the ball and score, and that might be the game-winning touchdown, and you needed that, that play. So, man, that practicing and making those things as game-like as possible. Because I've been places where we did it different and we did things that were practice-oriented, and then we just assumed that when we get in the game, they'll huddle around and we'll get the information and everything will be great. And it doesn't always work like that. And some mature teams do, and everything's always fine, but in those situations. But I think that's an awesome way to manage practice.
For sure.
So obviously doing all that, still involved with the defense though, game planning, any of that. How much of that are we doing? Staring over the guy's shoulder? What are we doing?
Yeah, man. I try to poke my head in rather than sit in, just because if I don't want to leave the offense high and dry either. Like I said, if I'm going to roll into the offense and play devil's advocate, I don't want to be in the middle of a solid conversation with the defense. Let coaches coach, hire guys that are fully capable and let them roll. I will stop in and listen for a few minutes and then give some feedback or what have you if I feel needed. I don't always do that. Sometimes I'm in and out because I do feel like they're on a roll and doing well in that world. As far as game planning, I wouldn't say I'm as involved, especially in the box, back end still quite a bit. With this new hire, I think Coach George is going to do a phenomenal job, and in the same breath, just make sure that we're not overloading our kids. And I know that could be a challenge. I mean, even with me, man, coming from a full comprehensive high school and some that have been very successful. I'm trying to think like the last time I didn't have a Power 4 recruit before getting to Long Creek High School, it was a while ago, probably like 2016, 17, because I had them at all 3 of those previous stops. Coming over here, man, they're all freshmen and sophomores, right? And so it's like, oh my goodness, what are we doing now?
It had to be 16, brother, because in 17 you had them.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
You had like 3 of them.
I did. Yeah, all in the league at one point too. You're exactly right. Yeah, man. And so, I think that's been going back to your question earlier about what I've learned the most, man. It's just, again, coaching them up, coaching them hard, no matter what. It's kind of good, man. It's been really good for me. I think I've become a better coach because the expectation, it's not that it's lower. It definitely has changed, but I don't think that it's lower. I think you just find what kids can do and then you expect them, set a standard, right? And then hold them to that standard. And that's the culture that we want to create. Again, not to use that buzz phrase too much. I know you and I've talked about this, hesitant using the word culture, right? But like, what are the beliefs and behaviors of your people and how are you executing those beliefs and behaviors? I think that is key, man. And like in the game plan world, man, if I expect my defensive coaches to come up with a plan and I come in and say, well, no, this and this and that and everything else and just completely obliterate their plan, I'm not respecting them, number one. I'm not trusting them, number two. My belief is you guys can't do your job and I'm behaving on that. I think that's detrimental to what you really need as a, cohesion as a staff. And so, again, I'll go in there and say a few things. I am the head coach. At the end of the day, it's all going to fall back on me. But I can't go in and completely, run the room, if you will, if I'm not going to be the one to call it. I just think that would be more detrimental than would be of help.
Yeah. having just a little bit of experience in other fields and other professions, one thing I love about 99% of the coaches I've worked with and the people is when we come up with a game plan, when we make decisions, we're usually ready to defend those decisions. It's kind of norm in our world. The head coach comes in and says, why are we running this? Why are we running this? Why are we running this? And we had to think about it to a way that we actually can say, because of X, Y, Z, because of this, because of this, because of this, where, I mean, truthfully, and just talk to people in other professions, and I've spent some brief time doing other things, that's offensive to people, right? And I love that there's so many of us that just, like we had to come up with a plan and we had to think through it. And now the coach comes in and wants to know why it is the way it is. And it's, well, here. And if you don't like it, that's fine. Let's talk about why you don't like it. But this is how we got to the answer. And we do that so commonly and so effortlessly as coaches. And it's kind of unique from what I understand outside of our world. And touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to expand just a little, team standards, expectations. You're trying to build this environment, brand new school. Obviously, as a coach, I mean, you impact the school heavily. I would think. I know that in most cases, a head football coach, especially in the state of Texas, you're going to impact the entire environment of the school, the standards you set for the players. Just speak a little bit on that and just kind of tell me what your thought process was going in.
Yeah, no, I think that's been a lot of fun. I think in coaching circles down here in Texas, we've got a lot of schools that are opening because we're growing so much. And one of the things that you hear all the time, and I've even said it, is like, man, I would love, before I got this job, I would love to go start a school because you don't have to change a culture. You get to build it, right? Build it like you want it, whether it's scheme, whether it's, all the things, how the whole atmosphere and the environment of the school. And so one thing I didn't realize, or I probably did realize, I just didn't think about, was there's a culture everywhere. Where there's people, there's culture, right?
Sure.
And so the biggest thing for us is we had an existing middle school that fed into the other high school. Well, now it's a 1-for-1. We've got 2 middle schools and 2 high schools in our school district. And that was a really cool thing that now we know exactly who we're getting. We don't have to go over and recruit our middle schools because there's some districts that have to do that. And so we know exactly what we're getting, but now we've got to make sure that we're all on the same page. And so there's a lot of buzz phrases that can come about with culture and what are beliefs and behaviors, again, of your people. But I think the easiest way to teach that is going back to the social media piece, or whether it's on a t-shirt or a hat or whatever. I mean, let's find some things that kids can resonate with, that parents can resonate with, and let's make sure that we're embedding that into our people, right? So a couple of things that have come of that are 3 words. We're Dragons, so FIRE is an easy one. And FIRE is an acronym for family, integrity, resiliency, and elite. And with that, we talk about family, and I mentioned it earlier, but we're playing for the name on the front, but there are many, many different last names. Well, that's a very, very strong challenge, I think, for leaders to bring a lot of people with different philosophies, with different family dynamics, and all the things that they've been doing for years, obviously 14, 15 years when they come to us as freshmen, and making sure that they understand what our standard is and how we're going to get from point A to point B successfully, right? Integrity is what it is, man. Work with the lights on, work with the lights off, do right all the time. We talked about that earlier, that process piece. The resiliency piece, I think, is being tougher than the opponent, being tougher than, you're going to compete in everything you do. You're going to compete for a spouse one day. You're going to compete for a job. You're going to compete to be a great parent. At the end of the day, have some resilience or you're going to be flat on your face. And that's not what we want. And then I think that last word, elite, is a little scary to some people, again, as I mentioned earlier, but we're going to make sure that we have an elite mindset. And that's really what it is just have the right mindset about you to be the best you can be no matter what the situation and circumstance. And so from there, we went to tough, and tough is very similar. Tenacity, 1, unwavering, grit, and honorable. If we're doing those things, then we're showing toughness. Toughness can be defined in, I think, in a lot of different ways. But we want to make sure that those words that we say that the acronym stands for embody that, breathing the fire that we want to breathe. And then finally, the word elite, man, be elite in all things. And so that's a really simple one. We use Brian Kite's doesn't matter, get better. If you're the best of the best, there's still an answer, DMGB, right? If you're the worst of the worst or anything in between, if you're getting better every rep, if you're getting better every day, every practice, every classroom session, you're doing the right things. And eventually that's that elite mindset that we're after. And so, yeah, man, I think, we still got a ways to go. We got a long way to go with certain situations, but I think we're headed in the right direction. And it's kind of cool to see the entire school embrace that. People are talking about being elite in our hallways. People are talking about breathing the fire, and people are talking about doesn't matter, get better, because they learn from us, and you're right. I think as the football team goes, a lot of times the school goes, and then when you're the head of that, being the head coach and being the guy that was the very first dude hired in the entire athletic department of Long Creek High School, and now we're 41 coaches in, like, they're looking to me to be that and everything else, right? And so, sometimes I do feel like a fireman, like all I do is put out fires, but going back to the self-reflection piece, okay, well, if that's all I'm doing, then I'm not communicating something right somewhere along the way. I got to get better in these areas so that I'm not putting fires out all the time. We're enhancing our culture through the beliefs and the behaviors of what I'm doing too. And so, man, it's a tall task. And sometimes I think, even scheme is therapeutic, right? Like, I just want to talk ball instead of all these other things, but it's important to make sure those other things are intact.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, sometimes as an assistant or as a coordinator, you sit there and you talk so much football and you're like, man, I need to get away from this for a few minutes. And then you have to deal with all these other aspects. You're like, man, I need to get back to that. That was way simpler than what's going on around here right now. That's what we do. That's our nature. And then, you get all these other responsibilities and it's like, whew, okay. So, but I think that's where you recognize that and you say, I'm in the middle of growth. Those are the things that have become over time so natural to us to have a plan and to have principles and have a belief system that we can make those decisions quickly, where now you get into some leadership roles and I got to think through this decision. And that to me is just a true sign of growth. And you put yourself in those positions to become better. Good luck on the continued success with
I appreciate it, man. Yeah.
So I really appreciate you being here. I think that there's so much that people can learn from you. You've had the career of just somebody that's really worked their way through it. I've got to experience a lot of those steps of it as somebody that recruited the schools you were in, and I'm really excited for you in Long Creek, and just to see what you can do with them here in the future. As I think I told you in the past, it's an exciting time because 17 and 18-year-olds typically beat 15 and 16-year-olds in football. So it's nice to be loaded up with some older guys now, and to really be in some ways year one of the program now with a full squad. And man, I look forward to following the team this year.
I appreciate you, Coach Carrel, man. You're a staple in this profession, and I appreciate all that you've done for me, man. And what I learned from you goes without saying, man. You're a stud. So I appreciate this opportunity. Good to talk to you.
Awesome, man. And anybody that's listening can check out Coach Harvey on the No Free Yards Clinic, Situational Football Clinic, coming up June 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Talk briefly, just a few seconds, about what your topic was and what you did.
Yes, sir. So we'll talk red zone defense, both high zone and low zone, the philosophy behind, my thought process in it, and, where the field is squeezed, where it's not. Basically, when you want to be aggressive and when not. We'll show some film, all from the school that I'm at. That's one of the things that I told myself when I took this job. I would not go back into the archives because it's easy to go and show those guys that are in the league. I'm not doing that. So you'll see the bread and butter of what we've been going through over the last couple of years with Long Creek, but I'm happy to show it. I love those kids, love these kids, and excited about, just sharing a little bit about what I've learned in the red zone defense, because we've had a lot of opportunities in the last 2 years, unfortunately.
Yeah, I do appreciate the clinics, though, that are recruiting clinics when they say, yeah, just get you a Caden Stearns right here, right?
That's right. I would love to.
And yeah, he was supposed to go to the post, but he jumped in front of this curl and took it for a 96-yard touchdown return in the red zone. So just do that. And that's what we do. So I call those recruiting clinics. So go ahead and put the marker down and pick the phone up and find a better player. So
100%, man. I would love to do that, but that's not reality. Not if you want to keep your job. That's right.
Awesome, brother. Well, I appreciate you, man. Look forward to seeing you next week I know you'd pre-recorded sessions, and then we got some live stuff to do. Hope to see everybody else there, and excited to kick that thing off next week, man.
Likewise, man. Appreciate you.
If you want to keep building your defense around situations that actually decide games, join us for the No Free Yards Win the Situation Clinic. You'll get on-demand clinic sessions, and the live opportunities are from June 2nd through 4th at 7 p.m. with practical ideas from coaches who are building this into their weekly preparation. The link to the clinic is in the description. Thanks for listening, and follow all we do at coachandcoordinator.com.